He is a full-time founder, director of Infinity Foundation and in Princeton, New Jersey. He also serves as chairman of the board of governors of the Center of Index Studies at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, and as advisors to various organizations. It is a privilege to have you here, sir. May I now call upon Sri Rajiv Malhotra to enlighten us on this auspicious occasion. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm comfortable. Namaskar. Thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here in this beautiful campus. Been to Jaipur many times, but first time in this wonderful campus. I'm glad you have the word disruption in the theme, which both speakers highlighted, because I would like to propose a few provocations. I think there's a common trend in India. I lived in the US for 44 years, but every year I come 3 or 4 times, so I'm very connected. And therefore I'm also able to see what the trends are in a longitudinal study with. One of the assumptions people seem to be making is that modernization means westernization. Modernization means westernization. You simply assume. And therefore language must be English. You simply assume. To start with, I would like to point out that in China, they have a paradigm they're promoting called Confucian modernity. Confucius is their ancient thinker from thousands of years BC. They consider themselves to be a Confucian people, Confucian ideas, philosophy, society, everything. And they say that their modernity is not Western modernity, but Confucian modernity. They spend a lot of time and energy to construct a sense of the national narrative as a non-Western Confucian people, for the reason they don't want to be sucked in as a second-rate Western satellite. They want to have an alternative to the Western way of thinking. So to promote the Confucian ideas, Confucian modernity, they have set up 100 international institutes in many leading universities around the world, called Confucian Institutes, where they promote this kind of a worldview. This is very interesting. They've also got a alternative to the internet. They call it I2, and it's superior, faster, more updated, because this internet is based on a platform which is very old. And they have an alternative to Google, which has got more market share than Google or Facebook in China. They are perfecting that, building a critical mass of content, and then taking it worldwide as an alternative. So you will be hit with these kind of things as a Chinese alternative to this Western modernity and the Western knowledge system. This is important because people have simply assumed that universalism means Western universalism. They have simply assumed that. In fact, the previous book I wrote was an Indian challenge to Western universalism. The title is Being Different, an Indian challenge to Western universalism. One of the methods of resisting Western universalism and claiming one's own is to look at words in your native language which are not translatable, non-translatable words. So I have a whole chapter called Sanskrit non-translatables, where I give about 25 examples of words that have no exact equivalent. For example, yoga, you cannot say it's exercise, you cannot say it's gymnastics, you cannot say it's prayer. All of those would be a distortion to yoga. So this way there's many words which capture something that you cannot translate, not just English but any other language. Same is true of Mandarin, same is true of Arabic. It's not something extraordinary that only our languages have. Because a language, a word is an ecosystem. It's an ecosystem of meanings. It's a whole ecosystem. A lot of context, a lot of meanings in there. And when you take a word and replace it with something from another language, you are not able to capture all the culture, all about that geography, all the songs and the dances, all the flora and fauna that is indirectly or directly captured when you're talking about such an ecosystem. We saw some beautiful dances. The first, in tribute to Lord Ganesh, and the second to the culture of Rajasthan. Now, it would be very difficult to properly classify this in a very simple way in a modern taxonomy. In a modern library taxonomy, you call it dance, but there is more than that. There's a lot more going on. And we lose something every time we translate. So one of the things that I personally work on is how different cultures have different taxonomies or classification systems or frameworks of thinking which are extremely deep, such that when you replace it with another classification system, actually you've done a kind of colonization, you've done a kind of a destruction, because you've destroyed something native to that. It's like taking a plant which grows a certain kind of food, genetically modifying it, tailoring it, making it adapted for another climate or something, another kind of soil. You have changed. Change doesn't mean it's worse, it could be even better, but it's not the same. It has changed. So this is a common theme in lots of topics that I have. And I wonder, when you look at the classification systems of libraries, when you look at how things are, how they categorize knowledge into different categories in a modern library, it follows a certain philosophy, a certain metaphysics is assumed. For instance, psychology is separate from religion, because religion in the Western sense, as distinct from dharma, which is a very different category, cannot be replaced with religion. But when you look at religion in the Western sense, it has a certain history, it has a certain baggage and a certain kind of constraints within which functions. It has to do with organization, it has to do with revelations which are unique historically, things like that. Whereas when you look at something like dharma, it is not necessarily historically determined or historically unique, and it could also be originating from many places, does not have a claim on exclusivity in the same sense. So when you look at the role of where does psychology fit, and I've struggled with this for 20, 30 years. What is called psychology in the West is a sort of a separate framework, a separate space. But in our tradition, the theories of mind, the theories of consciousness, the theories of how to educate, what are the different planes and parts of the person, the nature of the self, are contained within the dharmic frameworks. So it is not a separate, it's not easy to separate whether this knowledge, whether yoga is about psychology, whether it is about religion, or what is it about health. These questions come, these classification issues have legal consequences, because there are legal cases being fought on whether something belongs in this category or in that category. And this is because a certain classification system, a certain culture, of a certain civilization has become universal. And we have adopted it. That is part of the consequence of colonization. So as a colonized people, we are happy, celebrating, embracing, and how colonized we are, how successful we are in mimicking and bringing these in. I'm often asked, would it be possible to modernize, have digital technology, be at the cutting edge of IT, without adopting Western universalism and language and categories? You don't have to go very far to answer that. If you look at Microsoft's Indian languages and you compare it with Microsoft's Chinese Mandarin, you take the product Office, Microsoft Office. In Indian languages, only the content is in the Indian language, but the commands are in English. So IRR in Excel for internal rate of return is IRR. So a guy could be coming from a village, may not know what is this IRR. Even more simply, save a file, saving a file. But save also means, I could save a person, I could be saving money for myself, I could be saving, so the word save in English has got a lot of context. It's an ecosystem. And there is this one use of it for saving a file. A person in another native language might not quite relate to what is this called. In Mandarin, in the Office product, the commands are also in language. Not that the commands are in English and only the content is in language. This becomes very clear when you go to remote places where they're in India, where they're keeping their Indian language, they want to learn technology, they're forced to learn a certain amount of English categories and English ways of thinking as a result of that, just to be able to enter their content in some language of their own. This is not the case in China, because China demanded not just translatability of fonts and so on, but commands. We read what in their own terms. This is very important if you want to have a sense of nation and a sense of history and a sense of who you are, and not just get digested as a second-class satellite of the Americans. That's a choice you have to make. China has clearly made that choice. Japan clearly made that choice. And India seems to have having made another different kind of choice. So one of the things to be debated in conferences like these is whether modernization, digitization, and to what extent it should mean westernization. And is there another way? Is there an equivalent way? Is there an alternative way? Not that they're no good, we are better, but are there many ideas that can be brought together? Now, if you look at Sanskrit today, has a very central role in computational linguistics. Sanskrit, Panini's grammar is being mined, studied, translated, interpreted, understood by a huge army of computer scientists, particularly in Germany, England, and the United States. With the help of a huge amount of grants they've given to Sanskrit centers in India. Jawaharlal Nehru University is a major center of Sanskrit. My friend Girishwar Jha is the chair. He spends much of his time in Europe teaching them Panini's language. Right now he happens to be there. The purpose of this project is to build natural language processing engines. So you take from language A, you want to translate into language B, simultaneous, so fast that if I'm talking on a cell phone to you, I'm speaking in Hindi, you might be listening simultaneously in Thai language, and you're speaking in Thai, and I'm hearing in Hindi, or it could be Korean and Japanese or whatever, with no delay, and no human translator involved, not sounding like a machine, but with proper accents and so on. This kind of natural language translation could become a huge blockbuster application. It could revolutionize the telecom industry, the media industry, all kinds of knowledge, how you classify. Maybe the writer writes in one language and you retrieve in another language. That affects libraries, that affects how knowledge is accessed. So if natural language processing can be perfected, then there could be huge changes in society. And instead of people having to learn English, they will have access to all the materials in their own languages. So it could create technology could create a pluralism of language revolution. It could do that. So instead of technology forcing you to collapse the languages into one, it could actually go the other direction. So this is a very important revolution that could happen. Now the strange thing is, Panini, which is Sanskrit grammar, Panini is the foundation of Sanskrit grammar, is also one of the founding principles in modern linguistics. The history of modern linguistics has a lot to do with structuralism that Ferdinand Saussure developed his theory of structuralism, and he was actually a Sanskrit professor in France. And a whole lot of modern linguistics in the 1800s in Europe was developed using Sanskrit grammar as a sort of very scientific approach to language processing before there were computers. Now, the sad thing is that the use of Panini as an engine for natural language processing, allowing language X to come into this natural language processing, that for something in language X to come into natural language processing engine of Panini grammar, from here to be translated to language Y. The sad thing of this is that Panini's grammar is being distorted, diluted, simplified, morphed to fit a Western idea of linguistics. So this is a sad thing. for instance, if you have English with 26 alphabets and Sanskrit with more than double, how are you going to take something with greater number of atomic building blocks and map it to something smaller? You're having to lose information. You have to lose it. As the Vice Chancellor correctly said, if you take analog and put it on digital, somewhere something is lost. So, similarly, if you take a linguistic system built on a very rich alphabet with intonations are very important in Sanskrit. How you intonate changes something. So that intonation, the bhav with which you do it, the feeling with which something is expressed is very important. It's very difficult to capture it in what they're calling computational linguistics. So one of the things that I'm starting is a kind of awareness about this issue concerning computational linguistics and natural language processing, and encouraging Sanskrit scholars to propose an alternative to the current approach to computational linguistics. An alternative which will be true to Manipalese grammar and not a simplified, distorted version. This is an important kind of revolution we need. So what China is doing with Confucian modernity, why aren't we able to do by having Manipalese linguistics as a kind of foundation without having to compromise the things that are distinct and unique about our ecosystem? Why do we have to compromise the integrity of our ecosystem just because some people can't pronounce something, so we have to get rid of those pronunciations? This is what the linguist in JNU said, that our sponsors who got the money, who are sponsoring us, don't want things they can't understand, that they feel that they're outsiders. So I said, okay, you're being bought off to sell out the knowledge, help them take it to a system where you are the outsider. You and your pundits are the outsiders. They control. So this is, I've coined the term digestion. We are getting digested. We're getting digested into another system. So when a tiger eats a goat, there's no more goat left. The goat has been disassembled into little parts, and what was useful has been processed with enzymes in the digestive system and reconfigured, reassembled into the tiger's DNA, tiger's cells. So you have a stronger tiger, but there's no more goat left. What didn't belong is considered waste, thrown away, waste. So what is distinct about a civilization that is digested? What is not digestible is considered rejected, waste material. So you look at the story of civilizations, there were Native Americans who gave so much to the Americans settlers. And the Native Americans are gone, a lot of those things are part of American culture. You look at pagans in Europe, pagans have been digested, become part of today Christianity, there are no pagans left. That's where the Christmas tree came from, that's where Easter came from, that's where Valentine's Day came from. So few symbols and ornaments remain, which are decorative, and a lot of the knowledge has been digested and reprocessed into a new framework. So what you have is India as the next frontier for digestion. India is the next biggest frontier for being digested. China is resisting it. They will create an alternative pole, challenge all this with their own paradigms. Arab Persian world also resists it. Whether they're successful or not, I'm not sure they will be to the same extent as China, because China has both tradition and modernity on its own terms. And in India, unfortunately, we're being told there is a dichotomy between tradition and modernity. If you want to be modern, you give up tradition. You can be one or the other. That's what we're told. If you want to be traditional, then you cannot have IT and digital, and you cannot do modern things. You have to be very traditional, old-fashioned. But this is not true. Our own tradition has evolved in many, many instances. It's changed even from Ramayana to Mahabharata. It's a different application of Dharma. So Ramayana teaches certain principles that are not the same as taught in Mahabharata. And it is every few centuries there has been major evolutions within the dharmic system to update. And we call it smritis. Smritis are things, knowledge that is updated, that is human developed, as opposed to shrutis that are permanent, that are eternal. So the new smriti now is the digital smriti. This is digital era. This is the era of technology. This is the era of modernization. This is the modern smritis need to be developed. But that doesn't mean you have to betray and abandon and get rid of the whole dharma as your tradition. This choice as mutually exclusive between dharma, tradition and modernity as Western is a very dangerous choice we have made, because we've assumed that the only universalism that's viable, that's practical is Western universalism. So I have a lot to say, but limited time, so I'll just summarize my thoughts. I feel that the Googleization of the word, is a new form of colonization. Because while it seems that everybody is equal, all knowledge is free, sir, free. But how is it the richest company in the world if all the knowledge is free? Obviously, advertisers are paid, sponsors are paid. I can buy a keyword. I can buy a keyword such that when you search on that keyword, my site and my spin on that keyword will get privilege over somebody else's. But if you pay more than me, you can outbid me, throw me out, and your spin on that keyword will get market. So then they'll send me an email saying you can outbid X dollars by offering X plus 1 and get back. So this is a bidding. People are bidding with money on which knowledge representation and which idea is going to be prominent. So this is not like based on some merit or based on some idea of which version is superior. It's based on who has more power to buy. That is what it is. So this is a dangerous thing, because this kind of hegemony is transparent. It's disguised. It's not very clear. It's not very transparent. At least I know when somebody says that they have more money, they're going to have more power over me. At least I know that this is a game. But in the case of Google, most people don't know there is that game. Most people don't know. But if you're an insider and you know how search engines are optimized and how the algorithm of Google keeps shifting from month to month, and only Google knows the secret of what the algorithm will be. They can just twist the algorithm a little bit. So what used to be my number one item for me, it goes to page 5, and something else comes, and I don't even have any control over it. If you know all that, then you realize that a huge amount of power has shifted in the hands of a few people. This much concentration of knowledge power has never existed in the world before. Now I'll give you why I'm so passionate about it. My own personal entry in Wikipedia has a lot of mistakes, a lot of errors. It was set up by people who I was in debating arguments with. So they set up this entry. And every time I try to change it, they look for a lot of burden of proof. Both there are things about me which they have not had any burden of proof. For instance, my date of birth is also wrong in my Wikipedia. But I don't correct it because it's a proof. I can always say, you don't have it right, look at this. And they keep asking me what is the correct date of birth. I say, well, wherever you got all the other information from, which you think is true, go there and get this. So they're embarrassed also. But this is a power system which looks very transparent, very democratic. It looks like everybody can come and make the changes, democracy will prevail. Not true, not true. Because which aspect of me is chosen? Which out of the large amount? Which aspect of me is chosen and given privilege and with no burden of proof? And which aspect of me I have to prove in order to get it? And what is the criteria of proof? Western academicians should have, I should be able to cite Western academicians to prove a point. Which means the moment you say that, then it means that there is a certain yardstick, a certain criteria of what constitutes legitimacy. So legitimacy is at stake in this whole idea. I wrote an article called The Peer Review Cartel, which created a lot of stir, where I showed that a lot of these specialized domains of knowledge have peer review going on. But there's a cartel, because these peer reviews are people who know each other, they're friends of each other. This one student will do some peer review, and then this one student will get a job under that one. Usually, some of these ultra-specialized domains of knowledge are very small, very few people. For instance, the history of Indian astronomy, the history of Indian mathematics. These are topics of interest of mine. I do spend a lot of time on. These are cartels. There are journals, there are points of view, there are important professors and their students who try to control this. So under the name of democratization of knowledge, these new systems, these new digital systems, are also under the control of certain people. In fact, one of the founders of Wikipedia has himself written that he's disagreed with it. He says that what he's created is a system of huge amount of control in the hands of a few people with a hierarchy of lower level people. So people at the lower level fighting, thinking that democracy they can win, but ultimately the game is control. So the question is, who are the gatekeepers? And is there a deceptively free market of ideas, which is worse than a censored market where at least you know you're censored? And this Times of India has pioneered paid editorials, which is an Indian invention, because I didn't see this anywhere else. When there's editorials and there's advertising, which you pay for. The editorial, whether it's good or bad, biased or not, at least you don't buy it. At least you don't buy it blatantly. Maybe you do some PR off the site with some editor gets your article in, all that goes on. But now it's a system of paid editorials. You actually go by, you can bid more and will write you an editorial for you. It will look like an editorial, but it's an ad that you're paying for. So this commercialization of what seems to be and what is presented as free market is another dangerous form of colonization. So it's a recolonization of the world in a very sinister and kind of non-transparent manner. And to me, the disruption that I'm part of is to provoke people on this issue and to tell young people that you are actually getting digested. Your civilization, your culture, your sense of heritage, your sense of identity, your sense of narrative of who you are is in a very sophisticated way getting digested, such that you go, it's like this goat going all the way dancing and singing into the tiger's belly, thinking, I'll be this happy goat in a tiger, that I'll be part of this tiger. You see, so the person is imagining, foolish goat imagining, there's this image of this tiger, there's this belly, and I'm this goat sitting inside having a joyride. Okay? When in fact, digestion means that you don't exist anymore, you just finish off. So the antidote to this is if people reverse the gaze on Western universalism, reverse the gaze means claim your own standing place, your own stand, your own status, position. From there you reverse the gaze and you otherize the West and say that's how it is. So can we create our own approach to technology, our own vocabulary, our own, preserve our linguistics and things of that sort. And we have pioneered something in the University of Massachusetts. There is a Center for Indic Studies in the University of Massachusetts. And this has something called, a project called SALT, Super Accelerated Learning Technique, SALT. Now the interesting thing about SALT is, there was a man, Lozanov, from Eastern Europe, who in the 50s was sent to India by the Soviets to see if some huge, extraordinary capacities exist among yogis, because they heard the myth that these yogis can fly, they can do various things. And the Soviets were very concerned that the CIA will learn these secrets and this will be like a new kind of a weapon that they know how to destroy the missiles on the other side or something, some fantasy that CIA actually did this research also. And Russians did this too. So the Russians sent this one man to India to see if there is any extraordinary knowledge that can be of use militarily or however. And he went to several places and he came back and he said that one thing he discovered, which is extraordinary, is that these people have huge memory. They can memorize tens of thousands of verses with intonation. And they, with no need for notes or written text, they can kind of recite over. So he said this is very extraordinary. He happened to be a neuroscientist. And he was surprised that such a capacity could exist in the human mind, because he was not aware that human beings could have that capacity. So he went back and back, and after a while he defected and came to the West, and United Nations funded him, UNESCO and so on. These people funded him. Keep going back to India and understand how extraordinary memories exist among traditional people, yogis and people in traditional systems that learn how to memorize tens of thousands of things with precision. So he came up with the conclusion, and this became, and he wrote a book, and this became the starting point of the whole system of learning, which is very popular in the United States. It's called accelerated learning. And people sometimes send their kids to an accelerated learning program to learn faster, learn languages, learn different kind of things faster. So this project in the University of Massachusetts goes back to the original source of this person, which is in our Indian tradition, to see what are the learning resources we have, which are extraordinary. And what Lozanov concluded is that the use of music and the body in dance while you are learning analytical mathematics knowledge, dual brain, left brain contains one kind of thing, right brain contains the other kind of thing, is a very important part, because you have dual brain mapping. So the representation in your neurons, in your mind, is not a left brain only or a right brain only, but a dual brain. And the example he gave is that they are singing the mathematics tables, the multiplication tables, singing these as a part of learning. So the singing part is the right brain part, and the mathematical knowledge part is the left brain part. And because they're singing, it's a dual brain representation. Then he says that they're learning through dance, storytelling. They're actually enacting. So it's not like I'm reading a story about some people, which I'm supposed to memorize. That's one way. That has become the modern way. But I'm actually going to be enacting that. It is like theater. I'm playing the role of something. So maybe I'm going to be playing the role of Microsoft Office, and I'm the Microsoft Office. I have to enact that. This kind of a method of learning, which is very common in the Indian tradition. He, as a neuroscientist, felt that this is the key to extraordinary learning, quick learning, memory skills. So, one person in Massachusetts gave us a grant, $1 million grant, and the university matched it to revive this system of learning. So this is, we're calling it the super accelerated learning technology. And what they have been able to do is replicate the American K through 12 education in 6 years. So they're taking students, including dropouts, including immigrants whose first language is not English. Like a lot of immigrants from Bhutan have come there, they don't know any English. Taking people of various sorts, not brilliant, extraordinary people, but ordinary people across the spectrum. And they're able to pass the high school exam after 6 years rather than 12 years of education. This could be the big breakthrough in the American education system. Our tradition is bringing, rather than us getting colonized with their system of learning. So this is a little example. Now, before I close, I just want to say that if you look at the history of humankind, knowledge and communications, it started as oral traditions. Language is a very late invention in humanity. For tens of thousands of years, people had oral systems of knowledge and communication. And in fact, even in our tradition, till now, the person who has oral knowledge is considered superior to somebody who needs to have to refer to notes. Somebody who has to read out a text is not considered as knowledgeable as somebody who really knows it, because the body is part of it. So this oral tradition is the starting point of humankind. Then comes writing. When writing comes, there is an elitism. A few people write and read. It's a new representation system. And elitism is born like that. Then comes printing press. But the printing press is controlled by the elites. So it spreads the elitism. The elitism can spread itself, but it doesn't go down into the masses. Because even after a few hundred years of printing press, literacy rates remain very low. So few people would take the benefit of the writing system, and few people could read right. Then it comes mass education. Now mass education has spread the literacy, reading, writing oriented, the written word knowledge, made it universal, and almost like a cultural genocide on oral traditions, almost like that. There are a lot of knowledge systems of our country where very few people have survived who really know the original tradition in the oral sense. Very little bit of that is there. So this is a sad thing. But there is good news. I think I'm going to give you good news, but I'm not a pessimist. Multimedia, in my opinion, and I'm an IT guy talking like this, I'm telling you, multimedia is going to reduce the dependency on text because of the images, because of the sound, because you touch, you get something back. If you look at internet, 15 years ago, 95% of the content was text. If you ask the telecom companies, they tell you online is text. I was in that space as a businessman, I know that. Because of increasing bandwidth and whatnot, now 95 or 98% of the actual bandwidth is used for multimedia, video, voice, this, that. If you look at the human being, if you look at our indriyas, our senses are not linear. I don't read when I'm looking at a tree. I'm not scanning it left to right. I'm not linearizing my processing. My cognition is not linear. I get the whole tree. I get the sounds, I get the smells, I get all my senses experience that tree. And I have an impression of that tree that goes in my memory. These kids record it in many parts of the brain, different things. They're all correlated with each other. So even when I'm getting that same smell one day, I will think of that tree. That's how I recall. So the multimedia is the nature of the human being. And the revolution, the digital revolution taking us back to multimedia is in a way a possibility to return back to what is more natural to us. And maybe people who need to learn how to read and write will be people of a certain profession, people in certain professions, in certain jobs, they will need to know how to read and write. But a large number of people will be considered well-educated with basic reading, writing, and they will not, the majority of their knowledge will not necessarily come through text in the form, the alphabet text written form. It will come through multimedia kind of thing. Many schools, many kind of professions are teaching. You can go and get a plumbing training. The whole thing is multimedia. You don't have reading manuals. A lot of repair, very sophisticated equipment. You go to GE, you go to some of these companies and you see their new training manuals. They're becoming more and more video content, less and less text content. Even software, even apps. Many of them will give you a demo, a multimedia demo how to use something, and they're not bothered with a very heavy manual, nobody will read it. So technology, while privileging written text for centuries, could evolve further into technologies that will again privilege the human being who is not colonized by text and particular languages. He could have many languages, he could have many sensory ways of experiencing, and that may be the future. I would even predict that what is called big data, in the IT world, big data, will process videos, be able to catalog, index the video automatically, translate the video, even automatic animation software, where you won't need the real Shah Rukh Khan, but you could have the Shah Rukh Khan in the movie animated. So you may have a library of characters that you license. Some of them may be real, some may be fictitious, and then you can actually make movies which are indifferentiable. They're so good that you cannot even tell that it's not a real actor. So I think that technology has been a source of hegemony and control in the hands of a few people. I give you some examples, including people like Google. But I feel that technology can also be a great rescuer, because technology can give us ways that we can sort of decolonize ourselves, liberate ourselves, So that's the positive message on which I want to leave you, that you can modernize without necessarily westernizing. You can become very tech savvy, computer literate, digital savvy. Hopefully there'll be people providing platforms that don't require collapsing all the languages into one. Thank you very much.